Fletcher. I'm a sophomore biology major at Atlanta University from the home of Sacramento, California.
Hello, my name is Binathea Orlu. I'm a junior music major from Detroit, Michigan, and I go to the lovely Morehouse College.
Hi, my name is Elise Sampson. I'm a freshman political science major at the illustrious Spelman College, and I am from Smyrna, Delaware.
Great to be here, guys. Nice to meet you. Courtney English, Senior Advisor to the Mayor and Chief Policy Officer for the City of Atlanta.
Welcome to the Change Podcast, a podcast that gives college change agents an opportunity to express their voice. The Change is a platform created to ask and answer questions that are relevant to this generation of leaders. On The Change, a diverse range of topics are addressed. Everything from civic engagement and racism to LGBTQ identity and gentrification. The Change Podcast is sponsored by the Joseph and Evelyn Lowery Institute for Justice and Human Rights. Thank you for listening. Follow us on Instagram, and now we welcome you to The Change.
Well, today you have already heard we have a special guest, the Senior Advisor of the Mayor, Mr. Courtney English. Do you have anything you would like to say before we get into these lovely questions?
No, happy to dive right in. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all this morning.
Okay, so thank you for joining us today. First, we are here to discuss the training facility that's being built here in Atlanta. As the host of the Change Podcast, we'd like to ask some questions just for some clarification.
Sure.
So the first question is going to be, what is Cop City and how did this name come about?
We don't call it Cop City. We call it the Public Safety Training Center for a few reasons. Because first and foremost, it's not actually just for police officers. It is a facility that is designed to train both police and fire responders, simply because today, as it stands, there is literally no facility in the city of Atlanta to train either our police officers or our firefighters. We are having to rent space from Atlanta Metropolitan College. Our firefighters, when they learn to drive trucks and through our streets, they're learning to do that in and around parking lots and large grocery stores when they're closed. And so the opponents, candidly, of the Public Safety Training Center, I believe, dubbed it Cop City. But we call it the Public Safety Training Center, mainly because we believe, and I think citizens hopefully would agree that a highly qualified, well-trained police force is not only important to public safety, but it's also important to social justice. And so if we want to avoid the kind of catastrophic tragedies that we've seen happen across the country and some here in Atlanta, we have to do a better job of training police.
Okay. Thank you so much. The next question is going to be, what will be in this training facility?
So the training center is an 85-acre facility that will have classroom space, community space. It will be the home of the Atlanta Citizens Police Academy. It will be the home of course, our firefighters training facilities as well. It will have a firing range. It will have an obstacle course, a driving course to teach both police and firefighters how to navigate on the streets while they're doing their work. It will have a relocated and redesigned firing range as well as some mock type simulations so that police and firefighters can train in real time on how to address the situations they may face on the street.
What does the training include?
That's a phenomenal question. And so right now there are, for police and fire, police are required to go through 35 weeks of training. By comparison, the state actually only mandates 10 weeks of training. And so APD's training is well over and beyond the state mandated training. In fact, we partner with organizations like the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, the King Center for De-escalation and Cultural Sensitivity Training. There's a 2-week curriculum that both police and firefighters go through to help them unpack and realize unconscious bias so that they can deliver their jobs and dispense justice in a humane fashion. So we are looking for ways, however, to improve that training. And since the murder of George Floyd, APD has adopted several training upgrades, including adopting President Obama's 21st century training tactics, as well as the 8 Can't Wait, which was a huge movement during the social justice movement of 2020 that bans chokeholds, requires a duty to intervene. And so all of those are a part of APD's training. But we are, and the mayor has, I would say the mayor is looking for ways to improve upon that training process. And so one of the things that we hope as we go through this process is, what are the gaps that may exist in APD's training, and how can we fill those gaps?
How was the timing decided on the 35 weeks, the 2 weeks, and things like that? Do you know how that was decided upon?
So I would have to check in with APD. I can tell you that the Atlanta Police Department is the largest law enforcement agency in the state of Georgia. And because of that, and just because of who we are in Atlanta, cradle of civil rights movement, so on and so forth, it was decided that, we had to go over and beyond the call of duty in order to ensure our police officers are trained appropriately. By context, I think it's important to know that, when we add training like from the King Center and add training like from the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, like those are attempts. When we adopt President Obama's 21st century tactics on policing, when we adopt 8 Can't Wait, those are attempts to respond to, again, those horrific tragedies that we've seen kind of essentially play out across the country. The last thing I'll say is that APD is one of all of the police departments across the country. APD is actually one of the only 700 that are actually what we call accredited. And so there are literally thousands of police departments in municipalities across the country, and there are only 700 of them that are accredited by the accrediting agency that does that for police. And so that just adds another layer of accountability to the process. So the last thing I'll say is that the current chief, Darren Shearbaum, actually led APD's transformation towards President Obama's 21st century tactics. And so that's one of the reasons I believe the mayor selected him to ultimately become the chief, because he comes at it from a mindset of social justice. And so I would check with APD to get that specific question answered in terms of how the 35 weeks were decided. I just know, the theory is that we need, the more and more we can train police, the more and more, they'll show up ready to do their jobs.
So there are also a lot of concerns about the recent police brutality towards African American men. So the question is there going to be something inputted to help the mentality of the police officers and to decrease the amount of police brutality that's happening to these African American men?
So I'll say a few things. One is that I think APD is certainly not perfect, right? And I think we've seen instances that candidly haven't put police in the best light happen here in the city and then really across the country. I think there's a use of what we call a use of force metric though, in terms of how often APD interacts with citizens on a daily basis, on an annual basis, and then how often they use use of force. APD's is significant. It doesn't even come close to the national average in terms of use of force. In fact, the use of force metric is around 0.008. The national average is well above that. So I want to draw a distinction between some of the things that we've seen play out across the country and what APD actually does, because I do think APD does things a little bit differently here in Atlanta, while not perfect. That's number one. Number two, I'll say we're always looking for ways to improve. And so, that's hopefully a conversation that we can involve you all in. It's a conversation that we can involve activists in. It's a conversation that we should involve academics in, sociologists and political scientists and theorists to bring that necessary grounding to ensure that, we have cops who are showing up on the job every single day, who are both aware of, candidly, a history that has played out in this country of African Americans specifically having distrust for the police because of the things that we have seen and candidly have experienced. I'm a Black man in America, and I've gotten to talk. I've been pulled over unnecessarily. I've been detained. I've been arrested. I've been, and so I am sensitive to, ultra sensitive to all of those things. And so we need help with that. And we want additional voices and leaders at the table. And we welcome that conversation to figure out like what needs to go, quote unquote, in the box, right? Like what else needs to be a part of this training to reestablish trust where it has been broken, to establish trust where needed, and to ensure that folks are doing their jobs humanely and with justice in mind. And so we welcome that conversation.
So to just clarify a little bit, so there is nothing new being added into this specific training facility, basically to improve the police brutality towards African American men. Nothing specifically, but you guys are it's in the topic of discussion.
Well, I think the new part is that the training facility doesn't exist right now. There isn't one, and so in and of itself. So if you want a highly qualified trained police force, like you have to give them a place to actually be trained, right? And so the new thing is that we're building a thing where police officers can actually come get the training that we all, I think it sounds like, believe they should have. And so that's what's new about it currently. And then number two, I'll say, is that we welcome a conversation again around what else should APD be doing? What else? How are we thinking about the training that should occur? That's a conversation I think the mayor is willing to have.
Before I get into my first question, I wanted to ask, you say you want to have a conversation with the people and have people volunteer or even be leaders. How would they get this information so they can reach out to you guys? Is there a platform for these people so they can speak? Is there a town hall meeting or anything that they can go to so they can actually voice their opinions? Because they can easily say that they have been voicing their opinions by these protests that everywhere you go, you see it. They say they use social media or different platforms to show their voice, but they're not being heard. So what do you have to say about that?
So a few things. I think I'll say a number of things. I think first and foremost, as the mayor has said, I think we have not done the best job of explaining candidly what this is and why it's necessary to people. And so that's on our job to rectify that. The second thing I'll say is that there is in terms of where you can go to let a few places, right? So I'll start with just a regular city council meeting. The city council meets twice a month. And they meet on Mondays. I think it's the second and fourth Mondays every single month. And you can show up anytime to let that voice be heard. And then on the off Mondays, the first and third Mondays, they meet first and third, and then committee meetings are second and fourth. And then on those off Mondays are committee meetings. And so the public safety committee meets literally every other week. And so all of those meetings are open to the public. They all accept public comment. They're televised, they're recorded. You can pull every city council meeting up from the last number of years to watch those if need be. Thirdly, I'll say there has been an ongoing citizens advisory committee that has helped shape the design of the facility. They have made numerous improvements and suggestions that have been heeded by the city of Atlanta. That committee is made up of members of the community that immediately surrounds the public safety training facility. I believe there's a contingent from DeKalb County, a contingent from Atlanta, Georgia, representing 6 neighborhoods in total. These are the folks who will be most impacted by the creation of the community, and they made numerous again suggestions around how we can improve, and many of them have been heeded, including changing where we build the firing range, eliminating the bomb safety facility. They've changed the design. They've added a green space component on the actual site of the training facility. They've made the suggestion that the other 300 acres be preserved for green space, which that space will actually turn into Atlanta's largest park. That's a long-winded way of saying those avenues exist already. If we need to think about what needs to happen in the future, we're happy to do it. But know that this has not been done without significant community input. In fact, that group has been meeting once a month. Those meetings, again, are open to the public. I'll make sure that you all have the date, time, and ongoing schedule of those meetings. But they've been meeting for, I would say, certainly well over a year and a half on this specific project.
So, what are the long-term benefits of having this facility? And to even make the question more personal, what do you wanted to have it to be a long-term benefit with this facility?
I'll say a few things. Great question. One, I think a highly trained police force is important. I think it's important, sure, to keep people safe, but it's also important to reestablish trust in the community. I think we've got to be honest about a long history of police brutality. We've got to be honest about a long history of just broken trust between our police departments inside of neighborhoods that have been filled by that are predominantly occupied by people of color. And so I hope that it's a space where that is designed in a way to attract the best and the brightest minds into law enforcement, into our fire department, who want to serve their community with open and full hearts and with an eye towards justice. I hope it's a place where we can come together and discuss kind of the issues of the day. That's why we're building a community space inside of the center. And so I'm hoping it's a place where we can figure out kind of how we always thinking about police training, how are we always ensuring that social justice is wrapped up in the men and women who ultimately will wear that badge. I'm hoping that it's a place that honors what the city's legacy of being the cradle of the civil rights movement. If there's any city in America that can get this right, so to speak, I believe it's the city of Atlanta, and our history has borne that out. I'm hoping that it's a place that, again, preserves. It ultimately becomes, Atlanta's largest park, so 300 acres of green space. I'm hoping that it's a place where that we can bridge the gap between the police, our police department, and the community. And so all those are my hope. And so, we need as many voices at the table to make that possible.
Before I'm a podcaster, I'm more specifically a student. And before I'm more specifically a student, I'm a student of the AUC. And as being a student of the AUC, we're part of the community of the West End. So how is this going to affect the West End community?
Yeah, so so here's so we need some truth and hope. Our police department is severely understaffed. Severely. We have roughly 1,500 officers sworn. We should have around 2,000 in terms of the size of our city. And so we need good people to sign up and raise their hands to say, hey, look, we want to wear this badge. I flagged that because the AUC, unfortunately, is in the middle of one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in the city of Atlanta, impoverished areas in the city of Atlanta. I grew up I'm born and raised in Atlanta, born and raised in Oakland City, which is just on the other side of the West End. It's a 7-minute walk from Morehouse to my front door, where I was born and raised. And so I know that reality all too well. And so I say that to say, like, what I'm hoping is that this center allows us to attract high quality people who want to wear the badge, who want to wear the uniform of our firefighters, who want to truly serve our city with social justice in mind, and give them a space to be trained, help us get to that 2,000 number so that we can adequately protect students in the AUC. There's no, geographic, I don't think, impact, but I do know that considering the challenges, some of the challenges that we have seen in and around the West End, a higher degree of police presence will be important to solving those challenges and bringing those crime rates down.
My last question before we start bringing up the AUC students questions, but a lot of people might not have a lot of information about Cop City or the training facility, but there has been speculations or even comments out there saying, like, is this going to be like a role of a military, or is the facility going to be like a military base and only there's certain people that can be allowed in or even trying to reach? So can you put a little bit more light on that so people can have a little bit more understanding?
Yeah, no, I think so. Again, I think this is one of the areas where I think we've done not a good job of communicating. So every police training facility, so what I believe what they're referring to is those kind of mock villages where people train. Let me be clear. First and foremost, every police facility, training facility in the country has them, right? And what they're designed to do is to simulate real world catastrophes, candidly. And so think mass shooting, think violent insurrection, even. I hate to say that, but that's, a reality of January 6th. Think the worst of the worst, think hostage situations like we had two weeks ago here in Atlanta. Like most of those candidly get resolved in Atlanta without incident. They don't make the news. Only, unfortunately, the tragedies, like when the police do their job wrong, right? Those are the instances that make the news. And so, we had a hostage situation 2 weeks ago in Atlanta that SWAT teams were deployed, and the situation was resolved without incident. And I flagged that because, God forbid, when my aunt needs to call 911, right? Because something is going on wrong in her neighborhood, who still lives in Oakland City, by the way. I would hope that the people who show up on the other end are well trained, right? I would hope that they are able to adjudicate that issue with speed, with a degree of urgency, and with a degree of compassion. And so those villages, those mock villages, are designed to do just that. The only way, it's like anything in life, the only way you get good at a thing is if you practice it over and over and over and over and over again. If you think about a baseball player and a baseball swing, the best baseball players in the world are going to have the same swing over and over again. The best tennis players are going to have the same swing over and over again. The best golf players are going to have the same swing over and over again. What they're building is what's called muscle memory. And so ideally, those villages, those are designed to simulate kind of the most catastrophic instances where police are going to have to show up and be prepared to use force. The question we have to ask ourselves is, when they show up prepared to use force, do we want them to know how to do that? Or do we want them, kind of fumbling over themselves because they haven't practiced it? And so I think, unfortunately, if you look at Uvalde, where you had a large scale police presence inside of a mass shooting school, those folks weren't trained and weren't prepared to deal with that particular incident. And so the second thing I'll say is the way APD does their training, those villages are actually designed to detect unconscious bias, right? And so the only way that I know that this officer is, there are two ways I can know, right? I can know that this officer has unconscious bias when they show up on the street and they do something wrong and they pull you over, or and they jack you up out of your car for no reason, or for because that unconscious bias exists. Or I can actually watch them go through these simulated training exercises. And over time, the more and more I watch them, what it allows you to do with the right eyes on that training is surface unconscious bias. And so there are a ton of folks who actually don't make it through our police academy because of that reason, right? We had a live exercise, God forbid, knock on wood, that ever something that, we have to deploy these tactics, but there was a live simulation last week in Lenox Mall. So they had to take over the mall when it was closed, because again, there was no place to do this kind of training. And what they were training for is somebody running into the mall. It was a live shooting exercise. So God forbid, when that happens, I think we all agree that, if we're the folks in that mall, we want to be able to call 911 and have 911 show up in a timely fashion and be able to deal with that threat, but deal with it in a way that is, again, humane and compassionate, but also protects life. And so that's what those villages are designed to do. That's why they exist. They're not designed to train folks for urban warfare against the citizens. They are designed, candidly, to combat evil. And unfortunately, evil exists in the world. I wish it didn't, but it does. And I believe that we have to have a well-qualified, trained police force to deal with that evil. Then the last thing I'll say, and I'll be quiet on this front, is that we've seen again, kind of these instances play out across the country. And I think the more and more, again, we can have citizen eyes involved in the process, involved in what goes in the training process, the better off we'll all be. And so hopefully, again, the community space exists. We'll have community eyes involved in that process, but that's what it's designed for.
I have a question. So you said for your personal long-term benefits, you want the police and firefighter people to have a connection with the community in the end, a better connection. How do you see that happening with the separated and isolated training facility for 35 weeks straight? If they're gone for 35 weeks straight, how's that going to connect them to the community?
So I think, well, that's hence the community space. I think, we've got to invite people to that space to occupy it. I think we've got to involve voices in the training process in and of itself. I think there are ways to create, again, so the King Center training and the National Center for Civil and Human Rights training, they actually take place at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. They don't take place at the temporary training facility in and of itself. And so I think activities like that are incredibly important. I think we've got to do a better job of creating an atmosphere of what's called community policing. And that's when folks are walking the beat, so to speak, and building relationships within the community. The thing about community policing, though, is that you actually need more police to do it, because you need people to get out of their cars and actually build those relationships. You need people ingrained in the community. You need folks sitting on porches and talking to people every single day, and not just showing up reacting to crime. Those things are important, but you have to have a well-trained and well-staffed police force to be able to do that. Otherwise, folks are in their cars reacting to crime. And so I believe in order to get to more community policing, you've got to have enough staff in order to deploy those folks. So I think that's an important part of it as well.
So what are you guys going to do to encourage people to join the police force if that's how you feel is the reason we're disconnected from the community? How are you guys going to encourage young people to join the police force?
So I think a part of it is conversations like this. I think I think our fire chief is a Morehouse grad. The head of our major crimes unit is a Morehouse grad. Is a captain of Captain Ralph Wolfox, class of 2008 from Morehouse. And so I think the more conversations we can have with students, particularly students of color, ideally those from AUC and around, like if you care about, for those who care about a lens of social justice. For those who care about protecting their community, there are a million and one ways to do that. But I would encourage folks to look at, like, you can change systems from the inside. And so for those people who care about it, hey, show up, raise your hand. Like, there are ways to run for office. There are ways to get involved in local government. There are ways to literally, show up and say, hey, look, I want to wear the badge, or I want to wear the uniform of our firefighters. And so part of it is conversations like this. Another part of it is, it's incredibly expensive for folks to live in the city of Atlanta, right? And so I believe that in order to create those community connections that we want to see, we have to make it easier for people and more affordable for people to live in the city of Atlanta. And so we're expanding our police and firefighter home buying program so that police and firefighters can actually live in the communities that they serve, right? And so when we talk about that community connection, that officer who lives in the community every single day is going to build a relationship with the community. And so it becomes, this isn't officer, so-and-so anymore. This is my neighbor, right? And when we build those relationships, because we have allowed people to be able to afford to live in the community through our affordable housing efforts, I think we'll get a better result. The last thing that's I didn't mention this, but I should have, the training facility will have cadet housing. And so one of the things that is often lacking in any police training cycle is, police come and they're unfortunately, they're either couch hopping, they have to find highly expensive temporary housing, or some of them sleep in cars, so on and so forth. And so we're building low-cost housing on the site where, while people are going through the police training process, they can actually live. And so it's called Unity Place. One of them already exists today. And so we believe by doing that, what we're trying to avoid is, we don't want people showing up who want to be police officers and firefighters who have no other options, right? Like, those are the people, that's when you get into trouble. You show up, it's like, I showed up here because I have nothing else to do. I don't have any other choice. Those are the folks that you want to keep an eye out for. What you want to do is create an atmosphere through pay, through affordable housing, through decent training facilities, through good training, that attracts the best and the brightest minds who do want to serve our community in the right way, to become officers. And that's a part of what the training facility is designed to do as well.
I have a couple questions, but I'll go ahead and go along in the end if we have more time to ask more questions. You can let me know.
Sure.
Thank you for your responses so far. The next question, there's been talks about deforestation and just the environment that this facility is being created in. So a student from Spelman wanted to know, when and how was the location for the training center selected?
Yeah, so I was not a part of city government in terms of the how. I can give you a little bit of the history, though. So the mayor took office last January, and so this was voted on, and the mayor took office January 2022. This was voted on in 2021. And so he was on city council. I'll give you the history. This site is actually the current site. The site is being built for the training facility is actually the former site of the police academy, actually. And so Maynard Jackson, another Morehouse grad in 1974, opened the police academy in the city of Atlanta on the exact same site. And so that later became, they shut down an academy there, relocated facilities. It became a prison farm. I believe that facility ended in the mid 80s, maybe early 90s. And so essentially we're building over the existing police academy. And so, or the existing police farm. And so it's where it is where it has been traditionally the site of the police academy. And so I believe that factored into the decision to essentially bring it back. As it relates to the deforestation, I guess, point that was raised, South River Forest is 3,500 acres. It's 3,500 acres. All right, let's start there. The city of Atlanta's portion of South River Forest is 380 some odd acres. The police facility is being built on the police and the public safety training facility is being built on 85 of those acres over the former site of the training facility. And so this isn't a situation where we're cutting down old growth trees. This is a situation where they're building over overbrush and in an area that, again, if you go out there today, is rubble because it was the site, again, of the old training facility. And so it's essentially the thought was put it where it was. That's the easiest way I can explain it. Yeah, I'll stop there.
A Clark Atlanta student asked, why did you guys decide to build this training facility over an overpopulated area?
Well, I wouldn't say that the Key Road site is actually very populated. It is. There are communities that are around it that sprung up around the training site, and so essentially what happened is that again, the site, a community sprung up around it, right? It wasn't a case where they put the community or they put the police academy. There was nothing out there. And if you ride down Moreland Avenue, it's mostly industrial in the area. There now, I want to be clear. There's absolutely people living kind of in the vicinity now, but that's because they chose to move to the area. Some of whom who acknowledge that, hey, look, there's going to be. It's always been the site of APD's bomb technicians. It's always been the site of the SWAT operations center. It's always been the site of the police training firing range. Those things have always existed there. And so essentially the thought was, hey, build it where it has always been because the people who live there now are used to that. And so that's one. The second thing I'll say is that again, the communities around it have had input into the design of the facility. And so they've relocated the training facility, the police firing range, and they've added buffers in place to minimize, so noise will actually go down from the training site as opposed to up. They're actually going to get a better experience now because they're moving it further into some parts of that green space as opposed to where it exists right now. And so if you drive the Key Road right now, you're going to run into the SWAT facility. You're going to run into the bomb testing site. You're going to run into the firing range. That's there today. And so this is actually a redesign in part to be more sensitive to the community that sprung up around it.
This question is from a student at Morehouse. What is the city doing to reduce environmental dealing with the area? Is there a reason that the facility was not put in a different neighborhood?
Sure. So I think I've spoken to that a few. I think both of those previous questions. So I'll try to hit on some points that I haven't touched. And so. Again, the facility was designed and then ultimately redesigned with community input from the people who are going to be most impacted, the people who are immediately surrounding the community. Number one. Number two, the site will have what's called double erosion control to ensure that the waterways in and around the South River aren't contaminated in any way, shape, form, or fashion. In fact, I will actually add that if you were to drive to certain parts of the site now, what you'll see is that a part of it is actually used for dumping, unfortunately. And so some folks who have from the surrounding industrial community use it to dump industrial waste, tires, rubber, and other debris in the area. So we're cleaning all of that up. Now there were 72 tons of tires, for example, found on the site that have all been removed. We're preserving and then creating the city of Atlanta's largest park with 300 acres of green space to be a part of the entire 3,500 acre South River Forest complex. So I mean, we're listening to the community as much as possible. On, I believe next week, what's called the Atlanta Regional Commission will reveal its plan for the entire 3,500 acres. They've gone through almost a 2 decades long process of figuring out what the entirety of that green space should look like, and we have input on it. And so, for the extent that we can impact or influence what happens on our 300 additional acres, ideally it'd be in accordance with that plan. And this is a project that was led by, again, the Atlanta Regional Commission, the Nature Conservancy, and a few other environmental groups who have played a significant role in the design of not just this project, but again, the surrounding areas. And so we look forward to taking those recommendations and acting on them.
Thank you. I just want to ask a quick question for clarity. You mentioned this park several times that will be on the training facility, and I just want to make sure, is that park open to the entire Atlanta community, or is it just for people at the facility?
It'll be open to the Atlanta community.
Thank you. The next question that has raised great concern from the AUC students, but specifically from the faculty as well, is what role have the AUC presidents played in the development or financial support of this training facility?
To the best of my knowledge, none. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of any role that they have played. Again, I can verify that, but to the best of my knowledge, none. I think the mayor and the president of Morehouse, Dr. Thomas, have had recent conversations as a result of the activism that we've seen on the campus of Morehouse, but that was in the last 2 weeks.
So how do you respond to the allegations by DeKalb County Commissioner that claim that the building of the facility violates the Clean Water Act?
Yeah, I think I have not seen that comment. So I'm hesitant to opine. What I can say is that that one opinion isn't consistent with what we have heard. I mean, we go through DeKalb County controls the permitting process. So let's be clear, because the facility actually, there's a part of Atlanta that sits in DeKalb. And so in order to get approval to build it, we had to go through a DeKalb County permitting process. And I can't imagine that it's odd to me that a DeKalb County commissioner, either their process, if that is true, that means the DeKalb County's process is flawed. Does that make sense? Like, it's their process. So I would encourage that commissioner to actually examine his process and figure out kind of how that's possible, that a project can go through their permitting process and violate federal law. That candidly doesn't make sense to me. And I would encourage that commissioner to evaluate their own process, because it's theirs, right? And so whatever boxes that had to be checked in order to get the building permit were checked, and the land disturbance permit was signed off on, and it had to go through county approval to do it. So that's an odd statement from a DeKalb County commissioner.
With the entire facility being $90 million, 30 of those coming from the taxpayer and the remaining 60 from private philanthropists, Atlanta's government only owning like 1/3. What precautions are being put in place that will deter these private benefactors from using APD as ponds?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I think the check against any democracy is the right to vote. And so every 4 years, people can show up and let their voices be heard. Number two, I think that the APD is reports to ultimately to one person, the mayor of the city of Atlanta, with oversight from the 15 members of the Atlanta City Council. 12 of whom are independently elected from individual districts, 3 of whom are citywide. And so there's an oversight component and check even against the mayor to that end, to ensure that our police are behaving in a manner that is that reflects candidly what we all want to see from, I think, police generally, but specifically here in Atlanta. And so I don't think that I have confidence in our chief of police, as does the mayor. I have confidence that the overwhelming majority of men and women who wear the APD's badge want to do the job right. And in the unfortunate event that something does go wrong, because human error is a real thing, I have confidence that our chief and our mayor will act accordingly to remove negative elements. And so, again, I think the biggest check against that, though, is first the people. And then second, the Atlanta City Council. And then I do have confidence in our mayor, and I have confidence in our chief.
That was our last question. Do you have to go? Do we have time for extra questions? What's your time?
I think we got 9 extra minutes by my watch. So there's certainly time on my end. And I'm happy to come back too anytime. So we could talk about.
Oh, great!
That's we'll hold you up to that one.
Oh, you want to go first, or?
I can. Just a question about the facility. Is it gonna have like restaurants? Just things I heard that it's gonna have like restaurants, movie theaters, things like that on the facility. Is that true?
So I think there certainly will be community space. There certainly will be a space for food. I don't know that there's a quote unquote restaurant. I have not heard that. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's not true, but I can get back to you.
With this facility being built, are there going to be less cops inside of Lenox malls? Like, people want to go to malls to feel, just to shop, window shop and everything, but we see many, more than enough cops in the mall. So are there going to be less cops inside the mall since this facility is being built, and that people are going to have the proper training?
Yeah, so I think there is a plan in place to, one, secure the site and also maintain adequate levels of policing throughout the city of Atlanta. And so I think what we have seen is a decrease in violent crime inside of Lenox Mall. If y'all remember, I know y'all we got freshmen and sophomore, and junior. Okay, there was a time where Lenox Mall it got pretty rough, and so we actually haven't experienced any instances of violent crime over the past year, and none to date this year. And so I feel like we're in a good position to keep folks who visit that mall safe in a way that that doesn't have an overbearing police presence. And so that's one of the mayor's goals. And I think we're well on our way to getting there.
You mentioned police with trying to decrease the price of living here in Atlanta, and then police coming into our communities and being able to, live in harmony with the civilians. I just want to know, how will that how do we ensure that doesn't become gentrification and police taking over our neighborhoods, and ensure that that's positive interaction between police and civilians?
Yeah, so I think, a few things. Atlanta has, and you unearthed like a larger issue. We have a housing affordability problem, period, right? So we need more affordable housing, which is why last year alone, the mayor made the single largest investment in affordable housing in the city of Atlanta's history, over $100 million. That's just last year. And there's a significant portion of what I personally spend my time on as co-chair of the Mayor's Affordable Housing Strike Force is figuring out how we make Atlanta more affordable for everyone. How we create a city where, whether you are the CEO or the bus driver, you can be born and raised in the city or move to the city and live in this city and thrive. And so there are a number of affordable housing initiatives that are underway to get us to get there. We're talking about a city that unfortunately hadn't created affordable housing really any over the last 12 years, but last year alone, the mayor put into play 5,700 units of affordable housing in 1 year, towards a goal of building 20,000 units of affordable housing over an 8-year period. And so we're well on track to hit that goal. And so that speaks directly to the gentrification question, because the more housing we build, the more affordable it becomes for everybody, right? So we want our police. What we know from data and research is that when police are connected to the community becomes safer, but it also bridges that trust gap. But I also want to build communities where teachers can live, and bus drivers and the school principal and the school teacher can live in the same community. because what we also know is that mixed income communities are just better from a public safety standpoint. They're better from an economic standpoint. And they create, again, what Dr. King called a beloved community. And so there are a number of issues. Like, we can do a whole nother hour-long show on what we're doing around affordability and to combat gentrification in and of itself. So I welcome that conversation, but I want to get to, if there are extra questions, I want to try to answer those too.
Thank you so much. That answers my question.
People will say that because of this facility being built, then it will be kind of contradicting that it will cause an inflation with housing and everything else. So what do you have to say about that? Because by building a facility that takes so much to put in, it might be taking resources or things that places will also need. To even, like, for us personally, what me hearing that this facility is being built and not being from Atlanta, I'm thinking that the first thing I would need is probably a Walmart that's probably to be built, or other places that need, like, communities, centers just to help out with, like, playing basketball or somewhere to be safe. Like, just from an outside looking in, it didn't look too good for me. So I'm just trying to get a better understanding.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I'm gonna say a few things. Number one, it's part of the reason why only $30 million. It's part of the reason why you try to raise philanthropic dollars to help offset the costs. Even then, though, $30 million from the city, $15 million of that is actually going to be going towards rebuilding our 911 call center. For folks who have lived in Atlanta for some time, or if you've had to call the police, God forbid, our call times are too high. And so we had to rebuild our infrastructure. So $15 million of the $30 million investment will be going specifically to rebuild 911's infrastructure to be able to answer and respond to calls with speed. To your larger point, though, this is not, building the training center is not mutually exclusive from investing in the community. I had mentioned $100 million towards affordable housing in 1 year. There's a $750 million infrastructure bond that was passed last year that was designed to repair our roads, fix our sidewalks, create bike lanes, safe routes to school, repair aging city facilities, repair those community centers that you mentioned, rebuild our green infrastructure in terms of our parks, deal with heat deserts so that folks in Black communities don't have to suffer from those negative effects as well. That's a $750 million investment that the voters of the city, led by our mayor, passed last year. $20 million for the city's first ever investment in early childhood education that the mayor announced. $1 million that are going towards small nonprofit organizations who serve kids on a daily basis. This year, the mayor has proclaimed as Year of the Youth, the goals of which are to ensure that we remove barriers that stand in the way of our young people learning. So barriers of healthcare, barriers of food. So we're partnering with Gutter to ensure that anybody who wants food in Atlanta has access to it. Barriers of affordable housing. I mentioned that $100 million investment before, and that is literally just the tip of the iceberg of our affordable housing efforts. In a week, you're going to hear a pretty sizable announcement. I'd love to come back on and talk about it, about what the mayor is about to do for our seniors in our community to help them combat gentrification. You've got the mayor's summer employment program, which hired over 3,000 youth over the course of the summer to ensure that not only they were being productive in society, but also they had money in their pockets. And every last one of those jobs were not just paid a living. They were not just paid minimum wage. They were paid an affordable wage of $15, $16 an hour at times. I could go on, but I assure you, our investments, PAD, for example, police alternative diversions, which we haven't talked about, is an entity that is designed to provide an alternative response to the police showing up. The mayor doubled their budget last year alone. There's $3 million for a community diversion center, actually, that will convert the city's jail into a community center designed to provide folks with the kind of wraparound resources that I think help mitigate the negative effects of poverty. And so when we begin to kind of do the tally, if you will, of kind of where the mayor's investments are. Really, what you see, I think, a mayor in the city who are perhaps for the first time in a long time dedicated to addressing the root causes of crime, being poverty, in my opinion, more so than we've seen in recent memory in the city of Atlanta. And so it's not an either or, right? Like we do need evil exists. And so we do need a high quality, well-trained police force with an eye towards social justice. But we also need to make those other investments. And I think we've got a pretty strong case to make that we are doing just that.
I have one last question for myself. So, as we know, homeless people and homelessness is a big problem in Atlanta. We're spending $9 million on a police facility. What are we doing about the homelessness?
Well, so we're spending $30 million from taxpayer money on a police training facility. And almost to the point I was just making, we spent $26 million on homelessness last year, right? And so those investments are going to continue. And so we can it's perfectly fine to raise that, but the point I'm making is that $26 million towards homelessness to help build relationships with the homeless and get them in spaces to be rehoused. The mayor just purchased another hotel actually to be able to provide temporary housing for homeless folks to be able to move them towards permanent housing. The mayor launched Operation Lift 2.0, which is a multi-million-dollar effort designed to continue to decrease our homelessness levels in the city. But there are ongoing efforts to that effect. We're exploring building essentially a permanent, if you will, homeless encampment that will allow us to provide homeless folks with food, with social services, with healthcare in one single space. And so those are announcements that are forthcoming. But I want to be really, really clear, because part of what I've heard in this conversation and in previous conversations with people, students, and so on and so forth, is there this belief that because we're spending $30 million in taxpayer dollars, we can't do other things, and it's just not true, right? And so literally last year alone, $26 million from the city's budget went towards homelessness. And so when we begin to compare those investments of a $30 million taxpayer investment versus $26 million for homelessness, and then $100 million investment in affordable housing, a $20 million investment in early education, I think you'll find that we're leaning into addressing not just issues of homelessness, but issues of workforce development, issues of job creation, issues of mental health and wellness. That's going to be our divergence center that I just discussed. Issues of early childhood education, issues of higher wages. The mayor authored the legislation to actually pay all city employees minimum $15 an hour. And so I could go on and on, but the case I'm ultimately making is that the very thing that it feels like you all are asking for in terms of investments in these other things that aren't police are actually happening. And so one of my takeaways is that we've got to do a better job of communicating those things proactively.
So in conclusion, thank you for your time. Thank you for we appreciate having you. Do you have any last words before we wrap it up?
No, I'm happy to come back whenever. So let me know whenever you all want to chat about whatever you all want to chat about. I think what has become crystal clear is that particularly over the last 2 weeks, is that we have not done any job. I'm not even gonna say good job, any job at creating proactive relationships with our student community. So we own that. I will take personal responsibility of trying to help bridge that gap, particularly as a graduate of the AUC. And so you've got an open line to me. Blake knows how to feel free to Blake to give these folks my contact information. I'm happy to continue this conversation because it's important. The last thing I will say though, And this is a challenge to whoever's listening, to you all on the call, whoever may hear this thereafter, is that, I think I mentioned I'm born and raised in the city of Atlanta. It's a 7-minute walk from my front door to the front gate of Morehouse. Oftentimes the AUC has been a bubble, and that bubble doesn't permeate through the issues that are happening in Atlanta. And so part of that is city government doing a better job, folks like me doing a better job of reaching out. Another part of that is you all doing a better job as well of being proactive about the issues, right? And so like we can be reactive on the back end. The police training center passed a year and a half ago. It's not a year and a half ago, but well over a year ago. This is not a new issue. And so of course some recent activities, unfortunately, the loss of life of Brother Tehran out in the forest has kind of re-sparked the conversation. The point I'm making is that, we've got to collectively own the responsibility of taking care of this place that's Atlanta that we all love, right? I know you guys are students, and that's not your primary job. Y'all should begin your education. And so I will commit to doing everything we can to build a bridge between the mayor's office and our students and AUC and colleges throughout the city. But I need y'all to meet me a little bit, kind of halfway. And part of that's creating spaces like this. And so you call, I'll come, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much again for your time. We understand that this was an issue that affects many and that feelings and tensions are high about this issue. We will continue to discuss this issue and try to bring accurate information to light as the Change Podcast. And again, we just want to thank Mr. English for his time.
Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Look forward to it.
We'll be in touch.
Yes.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Bye.
And that was a change, guys.
Thank you guys for tuning into this episode. Follow us on Instagram, and we'll be back for another video soon.
Weekly videos will be posted. Check us out. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Let us know who you want us to talk to next.